Lennon, what's going on, man?
Hey Casey, how's it going?
Great, man. Great. Let's jump into it today. We've got our three pieces: our assess, our feel, and our drill. Today we're talking about trunk rotation. We've talked about hip shoulder separation. We've talked about lead leg. We've talked about pelvis rotation. Today we're kind of diving into the back end of all that with trunk rotation. First off, want to know, you up there at BDG, how do you guys assess trunk rotation?
Yeah, so very similar to hip shoulder. We're going to obviously assess the mobility aspect of it. That's a very crucial component of it, understanding how an athlete can rotate their spine and in flexion and extension. So just because we're talking about trunk rotation, there is also an element of flexion and extension that couples with that movement of rotation. So understanding how the athlete can move their joints off the mound is going to help us when we're looking at the biomechanical reports to understand if they can actually move the way that we want them to.
So when moving into the feel and the discussion of feel, we always start off with talking about kind of positioning of the athlete or where that segment's supposed to be at a certain time. We look at our graphs and we have our foot plant, our MER, our ball release. Kind of maybe give us a little walkthrough on like what the trunk is supposed to look like as it moves through the throwing motion and when.
Yeah, for sure. So like I was kind of talking about earlier, we have this time point of foot plant, and that's really when the trunk is going to kind of start its movement, or in a sense, the throw is going to kind of start at foot plant. So what we're looking for our athletes at foot plant is to kind of be in this neutral position, plus or minus 15 degrees, basically open or closed. Okay. So again, if I'm a right-handed pitcher, you ideally would want them to be facing, third base, but that's not obviously an absolute. They can be slightly open, slightly closed. As we move into MER, what you're going to see is we're closing hip to shoulder separation now. The trunk is rotating towards 90 degrees at home plate, and we're kind of stalling out that rotation. So what you're going to see from the kinematic sequencing graph is ideally before MER, we're actually hitting that peak of rotation, and we're now decelerating the trunk so that we have this good directionality towards home plate. Okay. As we go from MER to ball release, the trunk is going to continue to rotate probably past 90 degrees for most athletes, depending a little bit on their arm slot. And we're going to get into ball release. And again, the trunk is going to slow down.
So we often talk about, things like arm path and that early kind of rotation. A couple different key pieces kind of happen before foot plant, obviously, that can impact trunk positioning. Maybe give us a little about, why arm path could impact trunk positioning.
Yeah, for sure. So going back to this idea of trunk counter rotation during the stride, athletes, again, are going to kind of be bucketed into two different strategies with their arm path. So one is going to be more of an elbow driven, where they're getting a lot of that scapular retraction. And what you're going to see is as guys drive that elbow back, inherently that trunk is going to be pulled with them a little bit into that trunk counter rotation. Okay. Athletes that are more driven by the hand, that are kind of doing that whole little leaguer, ball to second base type thing. Maybe they're not getting as much of that scap retraction, and now that trunk is not counter rotating as much with the arm. So again, with our athletes, it's always a conversation of what is their arm doing? How is that playing a part in that trunk counter rotation during the stride? And again, understanding that it's not always, necessary to completely close off the chest. We do have to try to unload out of that position by the time we get into foot plant and then, beyond into the throw.
Awesome stuff as always, Lennon. Appreciate the time and looking forward to getting in the next episode.
Thanks, Casey.
See ya.